Age of Enlightenment, Part 12, Spokes in a Wheel. When I grew up, I had what was called a buzz bike. It was a bike that didn't have any gears. You just pedaled, and it was just a one-gear bike and had like a banana seat on it and handlebars. And we drove it across town. We drove it on trails. We didn't have a trail bike or an e-bike or a road bike. We had a bike. Okay? And because we did everything on these bikes, I literally one time, trying to be Evel Knievel, broke my bike clear in half. But usually when I did something stupid like popping wheelies or something, I would slam the wheels, and the wheels, the spokes would start to loosen and they would eventually break. Now, if a few spokes broke, the wheel would get a little wobbly, but it still functioned. But after a while, if enough spokes would break, the wheel would wobble so much that, first of all, you couldn't control the bike, and the brakes would rub up against the wheel, and it wouldn't function. So there'd get to a certain point where you had enough spokes out, it wouldn't work. I've often used that analogy when I'm working with young people, especially as a coach. Or the example I'm going to use is as a small group leader. In my church, I went to a mega church for almost 20 years, and they had Sunday school teachers that were called small group leaders. And we would commit to a certain amount of time. Like when the kids were young, you commit to maybe a 1-year term. But then when they got in middle school, they had a thing called transit, where you would sign up for a group of kids and you would stay with them during their middle school years. So when they got in 8th grade, you would graduate to either get in another group or you would go up. I would go up with my oldest son. Even though he wasn't in my group, I wanted to be a volunteer at the same year he was. So the last year was high school, and it was 9th grade to 12th grade, and it's called Inside Out. And you get a group of kids, and literally you have the same group of kids for 4 years. And although most small groups had 2 or 3 leaders, I only had 1 leader. The guys kept flaking out for whatever reason. And I figured since I was twice as old as most of the Sunday school teachers or small group leaders in that church, I counted as 2. But one of the things that kids used to always tell me, they're like, "Well, Mr. Robert, you don't preach at us." And I go, "No, I'm not the preacher. I'm just here to make sure you don't kill anybody or burn the church down. If you don't kill anybody or burn the church down, you can come back next week." And I had a lot of the athletes in my group. I'm a professional trainer, so it was really a good fit. And of course, I had all the cool kids, so the athletes and the cool kids attracted a lot of people. So my group actually grew. But the cool thing was, I didn't try to preach at them because, like I said, I wasn't a preacher, and I'm not a good Bible quoter because I just don't have a memory for it. I remember good stories, but I don't remember chapter and verse. But I would just always tell the kids, look, I'm just a spoke in the wheel. Okay, the wheel of your life, you've got parents, teachers, your small group leader, Mr. Robert, you've got friends, you've got, maybe you've got a little job and you've got coworkers. Maybe you're in an organization or a team and you've got teammates or organization members. But you have all these spokes in the wheel. And you can have a knucklehead friend, and, you may have unfortunately learned that you can have a bad parent, okay? And maybe you've been raised by a single parent, or maybe you're like our foster daughter, a member of the foster system. And I was actually adopted, so I had to have parents brought in by the state. So, and it worked out great for me. But my example is, you have a lot of spokes in your personal wheel. And 1 or 2 of the spokes may flake out. Like I could have quit as a small group leader like a lot of them did. And, you may have a parent that leaves a marriage, or, you may play a sport and all of a sudden you don't play that sport anymore. Like my son played hockey, and then when he didn't play hockey, he kept a couple of the friends, but a lot of the hockey friends that he had, he no longer, hung with them every day. So they weren't as good of friends after he stopped playing the sport. My point is, if you have 1 or 2 of those go out, the wheel can sort of stay intact. But when you have parents that are, their issues with each other drown out the issues you have, and maybe you're in a bad school, Maybe you don't have a place of worship. Maybe you don't have an after-school program like a YMCA or something you can go to. Maybe you're not belonging to an organization. All of a sudden, you don't have any spokes in your wheel. It's not going to work. Okay? So I encourage parents to be a spoke in the wheel. Be that volunteer coach. I train awesome parents, and I've had the privilege of knowing remarkable parents, and most of them, volunteer for one of my clients is a hockey dad. He videotapes the game and makes sure that all the parents get a video of the game. He set up a system that follows the ball, and just goes a remarkable expense and trouble to himself to make sure that parents get a videotape of the game. And I've got hockey parents that spend an enormous amount of money for their kids to play a sport. And I'm sure everyone that has travel kids in baseball or swimming are like, hold my beer, Robert, because my sport costs a lot, and Lord help you if your son or daughter is into horse riding and into equestrian competitions. Yeah, no thank you. I heard that is a fat check for many different things, including the care of the horse and the equestrian fees and the lessons. So yeah, don't even get me started. But my point is, I want you to try to be that solid spoke, not the one that breaks, but the one that they can depend on to make that wheel work. And then you team up with the parents, you team up with the coaches, you team up with the teammates and the civic friends that they have and the friends that they have. My older son has a sort of a geeky tribe, but he has his people. Like, he's a computer nerd and he loves to play Magic, and he loves to do Dungeons and Dragons, and he's sort of a geeky kid, but he found other geeky kids and they've got their tribe, and I love them. And they actually come in my fitness center on the weekend and work out together, and it's just awesome. But anyway, he's got his tribe. I call it his tribe. But make sure they have plenty of spokes in the wheel. And if you have the opportunity to be a spoke in the wheel, do that. Okay? Let's all be a solid spoke in the wheel and not be that one that breaks, that makes the wheel wobble in their life. Okay? How about that? Be a spoke in the wheel.